Today and Across the Fence, special exhibitions at the Montreal Botanical Gardens by day and by night. We'll see why Montreal is recognized as one of the world's greatest botanical gardens. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The international culture and cuisine of Montreal is a short drive for a majority of Vermonters, and one of the city's biggest attractions is the Botanical Garden. So this afternoon we're going to get a glimpse of the gardens and in particular the world-famous Fall Lantern Festival. Joining me is our frequent contributor, UVM Extension horticulturalist, Leonard Perry. Great to have you back.
It's always fun.
Now, why are these gardens so special and so important?
Well, as you mentioned, Judy, it is only just a little over an hour north of the Vermont border to have one of the top botanic gardens in the world. They have one of the largest plant collections in the world. They have dozens of gardens, over 100 acres. They have all kinds of new plants, design combinations with plants always come home with new ideas. It's just a wonderful place to visit every year. A lot of things change, and they have events each year, too, and we'll take a look at a couple of those today.
Well, one of the garden's annual special events is the Lantern Festival, and what does that involve?
Okay, the Chinese gardens is one of the main gardens they have there, over 2 acres, just like you might find in China, going back hundreds of years, and they have a lantern festival each fall, September and October. Here's an example of traditional lanterns, like you might think, going into the gardens, but they also have quite a few other lanterns, as you see here, that are actually life-size, whether people or animals. They have a different theme each year. Sometimes about maybe 10% of the lanterns are recycled, like these. This is depicting a famous part of Chinese legends called the Festival of Peaches with the emperor, but by day and then by night you can see it changes. Very different. Bright colors by day, but glowing colors by night. And then if you look close up, the detail is what I love in some of these. These are actually designed a year out in Montreal in collaboration with artists in China. They're fabricated in China and then sent over here to this continent to be assembled prior to the festival, which opens early September. A tiger as you walk in by day, and then you can see by night.
Wow.
It just comes alive. Looks like it's alive there. And then and some dancers, again with the peaches by day in the woods as you enter the gardens, and then by night, again, just glowing. So definitely special to see both day and night if you can. I thought this was a new one this year that was great. It's a tiger family out on the pond. There's a big pond and rocks behind, waterfall that the garden centers around. And this year's theme was showcasing the rainforest, tropical rainforest in the southern Yunnan province. Talk about both the biodiversity. There are over 5,000 species there, about 600 of which are endangered or threatened, so it's showcasing that aspect too, and the loss of habitat due to humans. But you can see by day kind of green, but at night.
Wow.
This was one of the most dramatic changes. Usually each year with the themes, they're bright by day, but this year it's more green. Of course, the rainforest is a lot of green, but by night you can see the colors reflecting, and even darker at night as the light goes and you get really into the night. You see the pagoda in the background lit up as well. The reflection in that pond just kind of doubles the amount of things going on. There are very few figures this year compared to most years. There are a few celebrating the peoples that live in that southern Yunnan region. Here you see some musicians and a peacock, and look at that peacock by night.
That's
it's
spectacular.
One of the birds here that feed off of the insects and so forth. So one of the farmers there is water buffalo by day, and you see a nice reflection, but by night, again, that just doubles in appearance with that glassy mirror-like effect on that pond in the Chinese garden. Again, these are all new lanterns this year, and then some more musicians, or the bamboo that you find growing in that part of China, southern China, and then by night you can see in the background too, the pagodas, and that it's lit up those rocks and the waterfall. It's just beautiful. You can walk all around this at night. And of course, pandas, these were seen in a previous year, but there are some endangered mushrooms, and those were kind of cool, and they actually had the shelf fungi that grow on trees actually lit up as lanterns too. But there you see the bamboo and the panda feeding on that bamboo by night. So just beautiful. A frog and a lily pad in the pond, kind of a lot of cute little details like this, and again, it just glows by night. So just some
So
beautiful.
some really big ones and some really small ones.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you walk in, these cranes, these were at a previous year, but just this setting against this wall was just beautiful. And then this was one of my favorite. It's close up of a banana flower. Actually, bananas grow there, and there's some leaves in the background. Again, these are all silk lanterns lit with low, LED lights from the background, so low energy consumption. They've changed over in recent years to those. But just a beautiful exhibit to see, and again, until November 3rd this year.
And so, and every year you mentioned there are different lanterns. Some are reused, but...
Yeah, but very few. Each year is a different theme, and it could be about astronomy, it could be about history, return of the emperor one year, and this year again it was celebrating, kind of to go along with the Mosaic Festival and the biodiversity and endangered species, celebrating that part of southern China.
Now, are they made at the garden, or are they brought in?
They're actually made in China. They're designed in the gardens in collaboration with artists in China, but they're actually made in China, but then shipped over and assembled, and all these are put up in the gardens, before it opens. So August, they'll be putting those up each year. So, and again, it changes each year, so well worth seeing each year.
Amazing. Well, the lanterns are really stunning, but there was another special exhibit too. Can you tell us about that one?
Right, that was some mosaic cultures, and that's one we showed some pictures earlier, but I brought some back because I was fortunate this year to see it not only early in the season, but later. Now, what mosaics are plants grown in a frame as opposed to around a frame, like a vine trained around a frame would be a topiary. Mosaics, they make a frame, fill it with soil, and plant in it, as we'll see. And this was an international competition held every 3 years. It started actually in Montreal a few years back and moves around the world. So it's back in Montreal this year. They had over 1 million visitors to it. It was spectacular, the setting. 48 of these huge exhibits we'll take a look at, and some of them early and late in the season. Here's one of my favorite. It's a tree, and again, a lot of the theme was about biodiversity, endangered species. These are over 50 endangered birds from around the world. It took 6 years to design and create this. As you can see, a little person in the background.
I was going to say, how
this thing
big
is
that?
50, 60 feet high and wide, and they actually had music around there of some of the bird sounds. It was just stunning and very moving to be there, and you can see a little bit closer some of the birds. Of course, the wings were not the tips and made out of plants, but all those others are actually, this is a welded frame covered with material mixed inside with plants growing in it. And they actually got up on these big cranes. They actually do like tree people and climb on ropes to get up. This fabricated so they could get up to train all those and prune on those. Mother Earth was another one of the 3 main figures. Now, if you look there, this is early in the season, up at the fingers. You can then take a closer look a couple months later. Look at those fingernails. They've just totally grown in, dark green, from some of the different plants, the lavender, cotton, or Santolina, and all the color in the background on the Mother Earth's hair. We'll take a closer look. It's probably one of the best use of the sweet potato vine. Most of that, except for the orange, is some other plant, but all the others are sweet potato vines, the different color ones, just trailing down there, just perfect.
I just had mine in a pot.
Yeah, exactly. Most people just see it on the ground, a waterfall coming out of the hand, and it's just spectacular to see. Here is early in the season to go along with the theme of the Mother Earth and celebrating the West and the buffalo, but those are cosmos, and if you come back 2 months later, you see it's like a field of cosmos that you can barely see them, and their head, hair from the carex grass, bronze sedge, has grown out more so. And then the horses is this one with a pattern on it early in the season. Again, you can notice in the foreground the plants, and then later in the season all the flowers and the grasses have grown. Later in the day, the striking colors. Again, on the huge Mother Earth exhibit, covered maybe a quarter, half an acre, the whole exhibit. Now, the third exhibit was a man who planted trees. These were a couple of horses there. Early in the season, cosmos, some bluets, a few rudbeckia in there, but look at 2 months later, those rudbeckias took over. Same planting, but you can see how a garden changes, and the horses were one of my favorite, those, and just how they look like they were running, and just the flowing of their manes and tail there. This was that exhibit, the man who planted trees, and later in the season, the tree was much larger. It had grown very quickly. And that's a dog that a lot of people like, bronze sedge. It's all that was made there. A face in a pond with, they actually made these frames and had floating water plants that were in the frames to make that design, which was a very creative effect. And then, of course, there's the reflection there. There were several woodland features, creatures of the woodland, and this was one of those in that exhibit. Now this was interesting because it's a hat, as you can see. This is early in the season. You see in the background, those are geraniums, and you can't really tell what those others are spilling out of the pot. But if you come back in a couple of months,
Whoa.
This is what you saw. Those were salvia, and look at just all blue, just huge in the geranium still. But what they did with the hat, you notice it has stripes. They let it grow in, and they prune these every week, if not every few days, and they came in and actually clipped the plants in there, yellow alternanthera perhaps, and to make those stripes in it. So even these exhibits changed. And this was the last one we'll look at was from California, and this is one of the few from the U.S. And this was kind of a old broken truck you might see. And but look in early in the season, early July, the plants in the foreground. And then if you come back in a couple of months toward the end of the exhibit, those huge grasses, these all the same plants that grew up. And in the very foreground, that kind of spiky plant's actually an artichoke, which they grow out in California. You see if you drive down the coast south of San Francisco. And then here's an actual plant with an artichoke on it. So those make actually good garden accents and the related cardoon. I use them in my garden. I use them at the Burlington waterfront. And if we go behind there, we see early in the season little begonias and some of the other annual plants to simulate, you know, in rows, a planted truck garden out there with the crates of flowers or vegetables. But look at this later in the season, just totally fills in. The juncus grass and the reed in the background, the bluish cast, and just beautiful effect. So, and then these were interesting. These were living walls. That's a very popular concept now, but again, it's framed, all filled with material, and these plants were planted in. If you take a close look, these are basically herbs. Some red alternanthera, but there's sage, there's thyme, there's a lot of things that in the evening or a warm day, you walk into this area, you just smell these herbs, the oils coming off. Just a neat idea someone could even do on the patio and just along a small area. And again, that fragrance, just wonderful. But this shows a frame, how it's made in July, and they had marked off the design. Those are irrigation tubes going back and forth. Inside of that is the mix that the plants are planted in, and there it is 2 months later, all planted, and you can see they train it and prune it just so you can really see the pattern. The same thing on the other side, being planted in July. Couldn't really tell what it was, but I was very surprised when I came back to see that the Earth, our home, and showing the solar system and how, you know, basically, it's again celebrating the concept there that this is our home, the Earth. We need to take care of it and the species here. And again, a lot of the mosaics, 48, were revolving around that theme.
And you almost had to go twice to see the change.
Yeah, you really, to see the change, I mean, it was, even from the first, it was looking good as you saw the early ones, but to see some of those small changes, sometimes I had to kind of take a look again to see what they were, how they filled out, but it was truly amazing again. They had a lot of people did get to see it.
Now, this exhibit may not return for quite some time.
It may not. It moves every 3 years. It's so popular and such a great setting. I'd be surprised if it doesn't return sooner than later, but usually it's about at least every 3 years it moves somewhere in the world. So we'll see where it goes next, but you know, hopefully it will be back to Montreal or somewhere in North America. But that's great. It was so close to see that.
Yeah, what a treat. So I know you take a group on a tour each year to Montreal, and this year you had trips to both in July and September. What were some of the other garden highlights that you saw? Okay,
Judy, yeah, there's just, as I mentioned before, a lot of new plants and a lot of great plant designs. I always get ideas, even every time I go up, even this year, 2 or 3 times, I'd see different things, get different ideas. And they have, you know, of course, conservatories. You can see new plants inside. I've barely made it into those this year. There's so much to see outdoors. But early in the season, the main effect as you come in, they have, it's hard to tell on the left, then it looks like some marigolds and then some cannas in the background, but look at 2 months later as that's grown in. It really is hard to see. Sometimes our gardens do this, but we don't notice it. We're there seeing it every day, but when you see it and then come back 2 months, and those are actually ornamental peppers. There are lots of great ornamental peppers, those on the left side there with those yellow peppers on them, so that's something definitely I know I've used in my gardens in the past. All greens, just different textures, whether you have chard, there's some of those artichokes or cardoons in the middle, and then you could have fennel or dill. I think this is probably fennel here, but look at 2 months later how that grows in.
Wow.
You can't even see that center part. So again, these gardens change. It's something about gardens that really gives you an appreciation for that. And one of my favorite was a design garden with all kinds of spiky, silvery, and pastel colors. Just a lot of great design. Using plants for their textures and colors irrespective, such as these blue desert agaves with succulents in the background, coleus, and then even here was just kind of ultimate of banana, bromeliads, ornamental grasses, tender perennials, just all together. And then there's some great sculptures too, which I hope I don't see any of these insects in my garden over this plant here, the lamb's ears. But it was just wonderful just to see that even and get some ideas.
A lot of fun. And so if people want to see more pictures, you have them on your website.
I have them on my website, and from past shows, even some of the original mosaics and some of the previous shows. So you can go to perrysperennials.info, my Perry's Perennial pages, and other botanic gardens as well.
Well, thank you so much for putting the photos together. It's great to see.
It's been fun being here.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.